The rain hammered against the windows of the Monroe penthouse like an accusation, each drop a reminder of what I was about to lose. I stood in the marble foyer, my duffel bag at my feet, watching my mother's perfectly manicured nails drum against her Hermès clutch. Behind her, my father adjusted his Italian silk tie, a nervous habit he'd developed over 30 years of courtroom victories. They couldn't even look at me. "You're throwing away everything we've built for you." Mother's voice cut through the storm outside. "Yale Law was your birthright, Rachel. Monroe and Associates has been waiting for you since the day you were born." I lifted my chin, meeting her glacial stare. "I got into MIT's robotics program. I'm going to build things that save lives, not defend corporate criminals who destroy them." The slap came faster than the lightning outside. My cheek burned, but I didn't flinch. I'd been preparing for this moment since I'd submitted my application in secret 6 months ago. "Get out!" Father's voice was quieter than Mother's, but infinitely more final. "You want to play with toys instead of honoring your family legacy? Then you're no daughter of mine." My brother Marcus emerged from the shadows of the hallway, his Yale Law sweatshirt a deliberate insult. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll take her place. Someone has to uphold the Monroe name." I picked up my bag, the weight of 23 years of expectations finally lifting from my shoulders. As I reached for the door handle, Mother's voice stopped me. "You'll come crawling back, Rachel. When your little machines fail and you're drowning in student loans, you'll beg us to take you back. But we won't be here. The Monroe family doesn't accept failures." I turned back one last time, memorizing their faces, the disappointment, the rage, the absolute certainty that I would fail. Then I guess I'll have to succeed. The elevator ride down from the 60th floor felt like descending into a new life. Each floor that passed was another layer of privilege stripped away, another safety net removed. By the time I reached the lobby, I was nobody. Just another 23-year-old with big dreams and a bag full of clothes. The doorman, Philippe, who'd known me since I was 5, wouldn't meet my eyes as I passed. Word traveled fast in the Monroe building. I pushed through the revolving doors and into the storm. New York in November is cruel to the homeless. The rain soaked through my jacket within minutes, but I kept walking. I had one friend left in this city who might take me in, assuming my parents hadn't already poisoned that well too. Jenna's apartment in Queens was a universe away from the Upper East Side. The building smelled like curry and industrial cleaner, and someone was arguing in Russian 3 doors down. But when she opened her door and saw me standing there, mascara running down my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside. "Jesus, Rach, you look like a drowned rat." She handed me a towel and a cup of instant coffee that tasted like redemption. "So they actually did it, kicked you out." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Everything I'd prepared to say, all my brave declarations about following my dreams, dissolved in the face of Jenna's kindness. "Well, fuck them," she said simply. "You can crash here as long as you need. The couch pulls out, and I've got a spare key somewhere." That first night, lying on Jenna's lumpy sofa bed, I stared at the water stains on her ceiling and made a promise to myself. I would build something extraordinary. Something that would make the Monroe legal empire look like a child's lemonade stand. And when they came begging for my help, because somehow, I knew they would, I would remember this night, this rain, this pain. I would remember everything. The next 18 months were a blur of caffeine, code, and failure. I worked nights at a 24-hour diner in Midtown, serving coffee to investment bankers who didn't recognize the Monroe princess beneath the grease-stained uniform. Days were for classes at MIT, where I commuted on the cheapest bus I could find, sleeping against the window and dreaming in algorithms. My first prototype was a disaster. The surgical nanobot I designed to remove blood clots managed to create more problems than it solved in simulation. My advisor, Dr. Chen, watched the virtual patient die for the 3rd time and shook his head. "The concept is sound, Monroe, but your execution is flawed. You're thinking like a lawyer, trying to argue with physics. Engineering doesn't care about your rhetoric." I wanted to scream that I wasn't a lawyer, that I'd given up everything to avoid becoming one. Instead, I went back to the lab and started over. Failure, I learned, was just another kind of teacher. A brutal one, but honest in ways my family had never been. Jenna found me passed out over my laptop one morning, my face imprinted with keyboard marks. She set down a real cup of coffee, not the instant stuff, and pulled up a chair. "You know, I've been thinking," she said. "I'm pretty good at software architecture. You're brilliant at hardware design. What if we stopped trying to do everything alone?" I lifted my head, blinking away the fog of exhaustion. "What are you suggesting?" "A partnership. You build the bots. I'll write the code that makes them smart. We could call it Medbotics or something equally terrible that venture capitalists will love. We have no money, no connections, no bullshit family drama holding us back." Jenna interrupted. "Look, Rach, I've watched you work yourself half to death for the past year and a half. You're onto something real here. Let me help." That conversation changed everything. Within 6 months, we had a working prototype that could successfully navigate human blood vessels and deliver targeted medication to specific sites. It wasn't pretty we'd built it from salvaged parts and prayers, but it worked. The rejection letters from investors came fast and brutal. Interesting concept, but we prefer teams with more pedigreed backgrounds. Translation: you're nobody. We're concerned about your lack of industry connections. Translation: the Monroe name would have opened doors, but Rachel Nobody gets shown out. I kept every rejection letter, pinned them to the wall of our makeshift lab in Jenna's second bedroom. Motivation, I called it. Jenna called it my wall of spite, and she wasn't wrong. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Winters, head of cardiac surgery at Boston General, had heard about our work through the academic grapevine. She flew to New York on a rainy Tuesday, always the rain, and watched our demonstration in silence. "How soon can you have a model ready for animal trials?" she asked when we finished. I glanced at Jenna, saw my own desperate hope reflected in her eyes. 3 months, maybe 2 if we don't sleep. "I can get you approved for fast-track testing, if this works." She paused, studying our cramped lab with its second-hand equipment and salvaged parts. "If this works, you'll revolutionize minimally invasive surgery. I want Boston General to be where it happens." We shook hands, and I felt the first crack in the wall between my old life and my new one. Success, it turned out, was the best revenge. But I was just getting started. The animal trials exceeded everyone's expectations. Our nanobots successfully cleared arterial blockages in test subjects with minimal side effects. Dr. Winters fast-tracked us to human trials, and suddenly, Medbotics was more than just a dream built in a queen's apartment. The first human surgery took place on a Thursday morning in March. I stood in the observation room, my hands pressed against the glass, watching our creation save a life. The patient, a 60-year-old teacher named David Chen, had a blood clot that traditional surgery couldn't reach without significant risk. Our nanobot swam through his bloodstream like it was designed to be there, breaking up the clot with precision no human hand could match. When David woke up 3 hours later, fully recovered, I excused myself to the bathroom and sobbed. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I'd done it. We'd done it. The failure my parents had predicted had just saved a human life. The media explosion was immediate. MIT dropout revolutionizes surgery, ran in the Boston Globe. The tiny robots that could save your life graced the cover of Wired. My phone, silent for 2 years, except for work calls, suddenly wouldn't stop ringing. I recognized the number that called 6 times without leaving a message. Marcus, my brother, the chosen one, the keeper of the Monroe flame. I let it ring. But the universe has a sense of humor about these things. The call I'd been unconsciously waiting for came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, 18 months after our first successful surgery. I was in our new lab, a real one this time, with proper equipment and a team of 12 brilliant engineers. We'd just closed our Series B funding at a valuation that made my head spin. Hello, Rachel. My mother's voice was exactly as I remembered it, controlled, precise, desperate. I leaned back in my chair, watching the lights of Cambridge twinkle outside my window. Hello, Mother. I'm surprised you remembered my number. Don't be dramatic. I'm calling because... A pause? Eleanor Monroe never paused. Because we need to speak, in person, it's about the family business. I don't have a family business, I said quietly. You made that very clear. Rachel, please. The please cracked something inside me. Eleanor Monroe didn't say please. She commanded, demanded, expected. She didn't beg. Fine, tomorrow. 3 p.m. The Ritz-Carlton lobby. You have 15 minutes. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly. Jenna found me there an hour later, still staring at my phone. Was that... Yeah. Something's wrong. The Monroe Empire doesn't call failures unless they need something. Jenna sat on my desk, pushing aside blueprints for our latest design. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. I met her eyes. I've been preparing for this moment for 3.5 years. I need to see their faces when they realize what they threw away. The Ritz-Carlton lobby hadn't changed. Same marble floors, same crystal chandeliers, same smell of old money and fresh flowers. But I had changed. Gone was the girl in designer dresses bought with Daddy's credit card. I wore jeans and a MIT hoodie. My success as casual as their desperation was obvious. They were already there when I arrived, Mother, Father, and Marcus, arranged like a Renaissance painting of familial dysfunction. The years hadn't been kind to them. Father's hair had gone completely gray, and new lines creased Mother's Botox-resistant forehead. Marcus looked soft, unsuccessful, like privilege without purpose. Rachel. Father stood, extending his hand like we were business associates. I didn't take it. You have 14 minutes, I said, checking my watch. I have a conference call with Tokyo at 4. Mother's jaw tightened, but she gestured to the empty chair. I remained standing. Monroe and Associates is in trouble, Father said without preamble. At least he'd retained his directness. The legal industry has changed. AI platforms are replacing junior associates. Clients want tech-integrated solutions we can't provide. We've lost 3 major accounts in the last 6 months. And I kept my voice neutral, but inside, my heart was racing. We need capital and expertise. The board has approved seeking outside investment to modernize our operations. Marcus spoke for the first time, his voice bitter. $5 million would stabilize us. In exchange, we're offering a 20% stake in the firm. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound echoed through the lobby, causing several heads to turn. You kicked me out for choosing technology over tradition. You called me a failure, a disappointment, a stain on the Monroe legacy. And now you want me to save you with the very thing you despised. The past is the past, Mother said stiffly. This is business. No. I leaned forward, making sure they could see my face clearly. This is consequences. You're right that AI is replacing lawyers. I should know my company is developing one of the platforms doing it. But you're wrong about what you need. What do you mean? Father's composure cracked slightly. You don't need 5 million. You need 50. The damage is too extensive, your reputation too damaged. 3 of your former clients are now mine. Did you know that they came to Medbotics because they wanted to work with innovators, not dinosaurs? The silence that followed was beautiful. I'd imagined this moment so many times, but the reality was even better. However, I continued, I am willing to make you an offer. Not as your daughter, you made it clear I wasn't that anymore. But as CEO of Medbotics, I see an opportunity. Marcus started to speak, but I held up my hand. I'll buy Monroe and Associates. All of it. For $25 million, double your current valuation, which I know because I had my team run the numbers. You'll retain advisory roles, but all executive decisions will be mine. The firm will become the legal division of Medbotics, specializing in medical technology patents and healthcare law. That's absurd. Mother sputtered. Monroe and Associates has been in our family for 60 years. We don't sell to outsiders. I smiled, the expression sharp as surgical steel. I am an outsider. You made sure of that. But I'm also your only option. Every other firm that could afford to buy you would dismantle the company and absorb the pieces. I'm offering to preserve it, transform it, make it relevant again. You have 12 hours to decide. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the offer expires at 3 a.m. I believe you're familiar with making people decide their futures in the middle of the night. The walk back to my car felt like floating. 3.5 years of anger, hurt, and determination had led to this moment. My phone buzzed with messages from my team, updates on our latest trials, requests for interviews. My real life calling me back. Jenna was waiting at the office with champagne. How did it go? They'll accept, I said with certainty. They have no choice. The beautiful irony is that if they'd supported me from the beginning, we could have built something together. Now I'm going to save them. But on my terms. And those terms include meritocracy, every position earned, not inherited. Marcus keeps his job only if he can prove he deserves it. Same for everyone else. The Monroe name stays on the building, but the culture changes completely. You're enjoying this, Jenna observed. I earned the right to enjoy it. Every sleepless night, every failed prototype, every rejection letter, it all led here. They threw me out for having dreams bigger than their tradition. Now their tradition survives only because of my dreams. The call came at 2:47 a.m. I'd been awake, of course, finalizing details for our expansion into European markets. Success, I'd learned, didn't sleep any more than failure did. We accept your terms. Father's voice was hollow, defeated. I'll have my lawyers send over the paperwork in the morning. The signing will be at Medbotics headquarters. 2 p.m. Don't be late. Rachel. He paused. And for a moment, I heard something that might have been regret. Will you at least consider what being your daughter again? That position was eliminated 3.5 years ago. I'm your CEO now. I suggest you start thinking of me that way. I hung up and stared at the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, David Chen was alive because of our work. Hundreds of others had been saved by our technology. Tomorrow, there would be more. The empire I'd built wasn't just about revenge, it was about proving that innovation beats tradition, that dreams matter more than dynasties. But yes, the revenge was sweet too. The signing took place in our main conference room, surrounded by walls of awards and press clippings. I'd had my assistant place a single framed item at the center of the table, the rejection letter from Monroe and Associates' venture capital arm, signed by Marcus himself. Lacks viable market potential. He'd written about our initial pitch. They entered like defendants approaching the bench, their expensive suits a stark contrast to my team's casual attire. I'd assembled my key people for the signing: engineers, doctors, researchers who'd believed in the vision when no one else would. They deserved to witness this. Before we begin, I said, standing at the head of the table, I want to be clear about what happens next. Monroe and Associates will undergo a complete digital transformation. Every process will be evaluated, every position justified. Those who adapt will thrive. Those who don't. I shrugged. You're going to fire people, Marcus said flatly. People who've been with the firm for decades. I'm going to hire people who can code, who understand blockchain contracts, who see AI as a tool rather than a threat. If the old guard can learn, they're welcome to stay. But the days of coast on legacy are over. Mother's hands trembled as she reached for the contract. I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. Interesting. The stress had clearly taken its toll on more than just the business. There's one more thing, I said as they prepared to sign. The Monroe name stays on the building, as promised. But the lobby will feature a new installation, a holographic display showing every patient saved by Medbotics technology. A reminder that law serves humanity, not the other way around. That's not what we agreed to, Father protested. Check Section 47, subsection C. Aesthetic modifications at the discretion of the new ownership. Your lawyers, what's left of them, should have caught that. One by one, they signed. Mother's signature was barely legible. Marcus pressed so hard he nearly tore through the paper. But father surprised me. He signed with steady hands, then looked me in the eye. I was wrong, he said quietly. About everything. I nodded once, acknowledging the words without accepting them. Apologies were just words. The papers in front of me were action. When the last signature was complete, I picked up the contracts and handed them to my CFO. Congratulations, you've just ensured Monroe & Associates survives into the next century. Marketing will be in touch about the rebranding. HR will schedule your onboarding sessions. I suggest you pay particular attention to the module on algorithmic thinking. They stood to leave, but I wasn't quite finished. Oh, and Marcus. You'll be reporting to Dr. Kim, our head of legal technology integration. She's 26, graduated summa cum laude from Stanford, and built her first legal AI at 19. I think you'll learn a lot from her. The next morning, I stood in front of the Monroe building, watching as workers installed the Medbotics logo alongside the original nameplate. The rain had returned, but this time, I welcomed it. Rain had marked every major turning point in my journey from exile to vindication. You did it, Jenna said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. None of this happens without you believing in an angry girl with a broken prototype. So what now? You've conquered the family empire, revolutionized surgery, made more money than we can spend in 3 lifetimes. What's left? I smiled, thinking of the plans spread across my desk. Neural implants to restore movement to paralyzed patients. Diagnostic AIs that could catch cancer before human doctors could see it. 1,000 innovations waiting to be born. Everything, I said. Everything's left. The Monroe legacy was built on protecting the powerful from consequences. The Medbotics legacy will be built on giving the powerless a chance to live. We stood there in the rain, 2 women who'd started with nothing but ambition and spite, watching the old guard make way for the new. Inside that building, my parents and brother were learning to navigate systems they'd dismissed as toys. Tomorrow, they'd learn more. In a year, they might even understand why I'd fought so hard to leave. But probably not. Change was harder than innovation, and pride was the hardest code to debug. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Winters. Another successful surgery. Another life saved. The real work was calling. And I had empires to build that had nothing to do with the one I'd just conquered. Come on, I told Jenna. We have a meeting with the Geneva team in an hour. Something about using our bots for humanitarian demining operations. From surgery to saving villages. You never think small, do you? I was raised to think big, I said, taking one last look at the building where I'd been declared a failure. They just never imagined I'd think bigger than them. The rain continued to fall as we walked away, washing the city clean for another day of possibilities. Behind us, the Monroe & Associates sign gleamed in the gray morning light. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying what hurt you, it's transforming it into something that heals. My parents had given me ambition, drive, and a desperate need to prove myself. They'd just never intended for me to use those gifts against their narrow vision of success. But that's the thing about raising children to be exceptional, you don't get to choose which exceptions they become. The elevator in Medbotics headquarters rose smoothly to the top floor, carrying me back to my real life. 30 floors of innovation, each one built on the foundation of every rejection, every sleepless night, every moment I'd been told I wasn't enough, I was more than enough. I was inevitable. And this was just the beginning. The integration of Monroe & Associates into Medbotics proved more challenging than any surgical procedure we'd developed. Corporate cultures, I learned, were harder to reprogram than any AI. The old guard at Monroe resisted every change, from the open office layout to the mandatory coding workshops. Marcus surprised me, though. After his initial resistance, he threw himself into learning with an intensity I recognized it was the same drive that had made him valedictorian at Yale. Within 6 months, he was contributing to our legal AI platform, bridging the gap between traditional law and algorithmic justice. I get it now, he told me during one of our weekly meetings. Why you left? We were so focused on preserving the past. We couldn't see the future coming. The future was always coming, I replied. I just chose to meet it halfway. Mother adapted differently. She couldn't code, wouldn't learn the technical aspects, but she discovered a talent for client relations in the new world. Her old money connections, combined with genuine enthusiasm for our technology, opened doors in European markets we'd struggled to penetrate. She never apologized for the past, but she stopped trying to relive it. Father was the holdout. He attended the required sessions, performed the minimum adaptation necessary, but his heart wasn't in it. 6 months after the acquisition, he submitted his resignation. I'm too old to change, he said, sitting across from my desk, the same desk where I'd once mapped out surgical procedures on borrowed equipment. But I'm proud of what you've built, even if I can't be part of it. I accepted his resignation without argument. Forcing change on those who didn't want it was as futile as my parents trying to force tradition on me. But I offered him something else, a position on our advisory board for medical ethics. His legal expertise, applied to the moral questions our technology raised, could still make a difference. Think about it, I said. The law you practiced protected the status quo. The law we need will protect the future. A year after the acquisition, MedBotics went public. The IPO valued our company at numbers that made even my parents' old money friends take notice. But the real victory wasn't in the stock price. It was in the patient stories that flooded our offices. Children who could walk again because our neural implants bridged damaged spines. Farmers in sub-Saharan Africa who survived previously fatal snake bites because our diagnostic drones reached them in time. Combat veterans whose PTSD was managed by our pioneering neurofeedback systems. Each success felt like a vindication, not just of my choices, but of the very concept of choosing passion over precedent. The transformation of Monroe and Associates was complete by the second year. What had once been a temple to traditional law was now a hub of legal innovation. We'd retained the best of the old guard, those willing to learn, and brought in fresh talent that saw code as another language of justice. The building itself told the story. The mahogany-paneled offices now featured holographic displays. The law library still existed, but it shared space with server farms running our legal AI. The portrait of my great-grandfather, the firm's founder, still hung in the lobby, but now it was part of an interactive timeline showing the evolution from paper briefs to blockchain contracts. You've destroyed everything we built, Mother said one evening, standing in that transformed lobby. But she was smiling as she said it. I preserved what mattered, I corrected. The name. The mission of serving clients. The pursuit of excellence. I just updated the methods. She studied the holographic display showing our patient saves over 10,000 now. Your great-grandfather was an innovator too, you know. He was one of the first lawyers in New York to use a telephone for client calls. Scandalous at the time. Innovation runs in the family, I said. It just skips generations sometimes. We stood together in comfortable silence. Two women who'd found an unexpected peace in the ruins of old expectations. The Monroe who'd been exiled and the Monroe who'd done the exiling, united now by something stronger than blood respect for what the other had become. I have a board meeting, I said eventually. We're discussing the expansion into Africa. Mobile surgical units equipped with our technology. Saving the world, one nanobot at a time. Someone has to. Might as well be the family failure. She flinched at the word. But I wasn't being cruel. It was simply fact. I had failed to be the daughter they'd wanted. Failed to follow the path they'd laid out. Failed to small enough for their vision. Thank God for failure. It had taught me to fly. The board meeting ran late, as they always did when we discussed humanitarian applications. The profit margins were smaller, the logistics more complex, but the impact was immeasurable. We approved the African initiative unanimously. Even the venture capitalists who'd initially resisted understood that saving lives was the ultimate market expansion. I left the building after midnight, driving through empty Boston streets toward home. Not Jenna's couch or a cramped apartment, but a real home, one I'd bought with my own success. Decorated with my own choices, filled with people who loved me for who I was, not who they'd expected me to be. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. An unknown international number. Dr. Monroe. This is Dr. Anderson from the Karolinska Institute. I'm calling about the Nobel Prize in Medicine. I sat in my car, engine running, rain starting to fall again. Always the rain at the turning points. The committee has been following your work with great interest. While I can't make any official statements, I wanted to personally invite you to present at our symposium next month. Your innovations in nanotechnology and surgical applications have, well, they've changed everything. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness, processing the possibility. The girl who'd been too foolish to follow tradition might win the prize that validated all innovation. I thought about calling my parents, sharing the news. But then I realized I didn't need to. This wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It wasn't about revenge or validation or showing them what they'd missed. It was about the next patient, the next breakthrough, the next impossible problem that everyone said couldn't be solved. I went inside, made myself tea, and opened my laptop. There was work to do. There was always work to do when you were building the future instead of preserving the past. The Nobel Committee could wait. The 10-year-old in Mumbai with an inoperable tumor couldn't. 5 years after that first successful surgery, I stood in Stockholm, accepting the prize that even my tradition-obsessed parents couldn't diminish. They sat in the front row, mother, father, Marcus, and his wife, Dr. Kim, who'd transformed him from corporate prince to genuine innovator. Innovation isn't rebellion, I said in my acceptance speech. It's evolution. It's taking the best of what came before and asking, what if we could do better? I talked about failure, about the gift of being pushed out of comfort zones, about how the greatest discoveries came from those who had nothing to lose because they'd already lost everything. My parents named me Rachel Monroe, expecting me to carry on a legacy of legal excellence. They were right, I did carry it on. I just redefined what excellence meant. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. I was thinking about the next challenge, the next impossibility to make possible. Because that's what failures do, we keep trying until the world realizes we were successes all along. Just in languages they hadn't learned to speak yet. After the ceremony, at the reception filled with dignitaries and scientists, my father approached with 2 glasses of champagne. To Dr. Rachel Monroe, he said, offering me a glass. The daughter who saved us by refusing to be saved. We clinked glasses. And for the first time in 8 years, I saw him clearly. Not as the tyrant who'd exiled me or the traditionalist who'd failed to adapt, but as a man who'd done his best with the tools he had. His tools were just obsolete. To the future, I replied. May it always terrify the past just enough to keep evolving. Later that night, Jenna and I stood on the balcony of our hotel, looking out over Stockholm's lights reflected in dark water. So what now? She asked. You've got the Nobel. The company's worth billions. You've revolutionized medicine and law. What mountain is left to climb? I thought about all the problems still unsolved. Climate change, aging, the digital divide, mental health. 1,000 challenges that everyone said were too big, too complex, too impossible. All of them, I said. Every single one. Because that's what we do. Those of us who've been called failures. We take the word as a challenge, not a verdict. We build our own empires from the ashes of others' expectations. We save the world one impossible dream at a time. And when the rain comes, because it always comes at the turning points, we don't seek shelter. We dance. The story of the Monroe who failed became legend in entrepreneurial circles. The girl kicked out for choosing robots over Ritz who built an empire that saved both. But legends simplify truth, and the truth was both simpler and more complex than any story could capture. The truth was that love and ambition could coexist, that tradition and innovation needed each other, that sometimes the greatest gift parents could give their children was the desperate need to prove them wrong. Monroe and Associates still stood, transformed into something unrecognizable but undeniably alive. Medbotics continued to grow, spawning subsidiaries and innovations that touched every aspect of human health. And somewhere in Stockholm, a Nobel Prize sat in a simple frame, not as an ending but as a milestone on a journey that had no end. Because revolutionaries don't retire. We just find bigger revolutions. The rain had stopped by the time we returned to Boston. The city gleamed in winter sunlight, all its rough edges softened by snow and success. But I knew better than to trust the calm. There would be other storms, other moments of reckoning, other impossible challenges that everyone said couldn't be solved. Good. I'd been trained for this by the best teachers, imaginable parents who'd shown me exactly what not to become. They'd raised a warrior without meaning to, forged steel in the fire of their disappointment. Now that steel was ready to cut through whatever came next. The empire built on tradition had become the foundation for transformation. The failure had become the future. And the girl who'd stood in the rain with nothing but a duffel bag and determination, she'd won everything by being willing to lose it all. Some would call it revenge. Others would call it justice. I called it Tuesday and got back to work. There were still lives to save, paradigms to shift, impossibilities to make inevitable. The Monroe legacy lived on, just not the way anyone had expected. And that, more than any Nobel Prize or IPO or vindication, was the sweetest victory of all. The future belonged to those brave enough to build it, and I was just getting started.